All right, hello, happy Wednesday. I am checking in right now from inside the RV since it's super windy outside. So today we're going to talk about our Healthy Homes and Home Performance series and specifically your heating and cooling system that's in your house, how you know if it's operating efficiently, if it's maybe time to replace it, different things you can do to help improve the air quality in your home. So, if you live in an older home, most likely you have a furnace with a duct system. So, with probably rigid metal ducting running through your crawl space or your attic, maybe even using wall and floor cavities, especially if it's really old. And this ducting may or may not be insulated or sealed, and it might also be disconnected. So, one thing, if you ever are experiencing any rooms in your house that are not really getting up to comfort in there, like if they're not getting the full heat or cooling, it's possible that, for one, it could be maybe a room that's at the end of the duct line, or two, you might have a disconnected duct. So when I go out into homes and do energy assessments, that's one thing I look for, especially when people have some comfort concerns in certain rooms of their house, is that maybe the duct has just become disconnected. So especially if there's critters and that kind of thing moving around, or if the system's just very old and wasn't sealed very well in the first place, that is one thing I look for. So duct leakage and sealing and insulation issues are actually a really big part of a heating and cooling system, and that's kind of why I just jumped right into that. They can be responsible for 30% of the energy lost in your home. So it's really important that your ducts are well sealed and insulated. So if you have a rigid metal duct, so it's going to be a round metal, if you have an attic or if you have a crawl space and you're not afraid to go down there or up there, I would recommend checking it, taking a look at it, doing a visual inspection and seeing, for one, do you see any tape, or hopefully not duct tape. Duct tape is not supposed to be used for ducts. So it has the same name, but that's not what it's for. There's special foil mastic tape, or it's not mastic, foil tape that is specifically used for ducts, but that can deteriorate over time. And so really the best practice is to use a mastic putty that is usually grayish in color. At least that's what I've seen. Trade people will call it pookie, or something possibly else, but just a really like a thick paste, and you put it on nickel thick mastic. So that should be sealing up all the seams. So between where the ducts are connecting to each other, where the duct is transitioning to an elbow or a boot. So the boot is the part that is what's directly underneath your registers from your floor, or up in the attic. So that's the last transition piece. So all of those different connections really need to be first mechanically fastened with screws, and then second, at having a nickel thick layer of mastic on there. So that's going to really make sure that you have a nice sealed connection to make sure that your duct system is operating as efficiently as it can. And then also that you're not losing any energy from those spaces in your house that you're not actually trying to heat and cool. So I don't think you're trying to heat and cool your attic unless maybe that's a living space. So generally duct leaks in conditioned areas, so part of your house, like maybe they're running through your basement, that's a conditioned space that's being heated and cooled. It's not as big of an issue, but it can, if you have duct leaks there or anywhere, it can really affect the delivery of air to the rooms that you want it. So really, the more you can do air sealing, the better. And then also from an air quality perspective, you really don't want to have duct leaks in spaces like attics and crawl spaces because they're going to have all kinds of potential contaminants from the outdoor air, radon from the ground, if there's any critters in there, mice and that kind of thing, droppings and that kind of stuff. So you don't really want to be breathing the air from your attic or your crawl space. So that's another, really, as it relates to healthy homes, that is why you might want to hire someone who's a home performance contractor to do duct sealing. So once your ducts are sealed, then you want to go around and make sure they're insulated. So you can do this yourself too. So you can do duct sealing yourself. You can go out and buy mastic and do the sealing. One other thing I do want to bring up is another kind of health, not kind of, but a health and safety concern with duct sealing is that some older ducts have what's called asbestos tape. So it's like this white tape that's on there, and it can be in different types of condition. So sometimes it can be flaking off and be what's called friable. So you want to be really careful if your ducts have this like kind of a white or creamy tape. Sometimes it's just at the seams, sometimes it's covering up the whole duct. And so one way to deal with asbestos, and that's not something you want to be breathing in or exposing yourself to. If I saw Isaac joined, hi. So that's not something you want to be exposing yourself to from a health perspective. So you want to make sure if you have any of that asbestos tape on your ducts, you're going to want to make sure you have appropriate PPE, so respirator, gloves, and that maybe even like a Tyvek suit if you're crawling around a crawl space. So, and encapsulating the ducts that have asbestos tape is one way to help prevent that asbestos from becoming friable and from getting in the air. So that's actually one thing you can do. You do not have to replace your whole duct system. So you don't have to be too concerned about that. And if you're up for taking care of that on your own and making sure you have your personal protective equipment on, that's something, again, you can get that mastic paste and do that encapsulation on your own, or you can hire a home performance contractor to do that work for you safely. Okay, so back to insulation. So if you have rigid metal ducting, you did your air sealing, then you want to make sure you insulate them. Any ducts that are in unconditioned spaces, again, crawl spaces, attics, or possibly basements if you're not heating and cooling your basement. So generally the code right now calls for R8 of insulation, so that's the R value, and that's kind of standard what the insulation comes in. I haven't actually looked around to see if you can get a higher R value, but generally more is better. So if you see some that has a higher R value, you have the budget to buy it, then I would recommend doing that. But generally R8 is typically what's out there. And you want to make sure that you're completely wrapping all the ducts and using whatever fastening is easiest for you. You can use zip ties or twine. There's different methods to do it. You want to make sure you don't compress the insulation too much or really at all, as much as you can get by without. I know it's kind of hard to do that on ductwork. And there's different guides out there online if you're doing it yourself. Again, you can do it yourself or hire a contractor to do the work for you. So duct sealing and insulating, very important for the effectiveness of your mechanical system. So I just got a question asking if I am a home performance contractor. I am not not a home performance contractor. I do home performance. Really, what I do is doing energy assessment, so doing the initial walkthrough of the home to identify different opportunities for improving the health and comfort of the home. And then from there, you could take that list of recommendations and hire someone who is a home performance contractor. I've worked for home performance contractors, and some home performance contractors do everything. They do energy assessments, they do the retrofit installs, and then they come back and do all the QA and do diagnostic testing. So I do diagnostic testing and I do the initial consults, and I can come back after work is done and do more testing just to make sure that everything got installed correctly and do visual inspection and all that. So that's something that I can do. So hopefully that answers your question. So, okay, so we talked about duct sealing and insulation, and then the other part about ducts, maybe you don't have rigid metal ducting. You might have flexible ducting. So with that, you want to check if you have that kind of ducting. If there's fiberglass in between, there's a kind of a plastic on the outside and inside. So you want to make sure that those connections to any rigid metal parts, so you're probably still going to have like a rigid metal duct boot and possible other connections, like where it connects into the furnace. And so you want to make sure that those are connected. Usually they do that with zip ties or some kind of fastening system that is secure and tight so that, again, you're able to not have any leaks in that area, so it's not bringing in pollutants and also letting your system operate as efficiently as it can. And newer homes typically have flexible ductwork, so if they have duct systems. And then, so getting to the furnace part, so the furnace is typically the piece of equipment that is inside your house somewhere. Maybe it's in your basement or a garage or somewhere else. Maybe it's in a closet or a utility room in your house. So looking at that, you want to make sure. Oh, I got another question. I'll answer that in a second. Looking at your furnace, it's also called an air handler. So one thing that's really important to do, especially the more time you're spending at home, like now, is to make sure you are changing out your furnace filter regularly. It's generally recommended every 3 months. So again, there's plenty of information online about how to do that, but generally you have to remove the plate on the front, and then there's like a inch filter. A lot of the filters are about an inch thick, and then it's good if you either, before you go out to purchase another one, you can take out the one you have or look at it or take a picture of it or take it with you to the store to make sure you buy the correct filter. Some of the newer furnaces have different filters that are thicker. So they have different like MERV ratings, and I can't remember what that stands for, but the higher the MERV number, the more different particulates it'll filter out. So if you have a newer home that has a more efficient furnace, it might have a thicker filter. So it's really important to check on that before you go out and buy a new filter. And also just the general size can vary a little bit too, so I'd recommend looking at your filter. And since I mentioned MERV, with a new construction, so if you're thinking about building a new house or having a new house built for you and you want a ducted heating system, I would recommend asking about having a furnace and a duct system that can have a MERV filter with maybe like a 13 or 16, somewhere in that range, just because it's able to filter out a lot more particulates and things in the air. And especially for, what we're facing right now with viruses and then wildfires and all that kind of thing. And it's really important to make sure you ask about that up front, because existing furnaces and duct systems cannot be retrofitted. Even if you, also for duct systems, if you are replacing your furnace, a lot of existing duct systems cannot handle higher filtration because you need to have a higher airflow rate through there. And so the duct system just wouldn't work. So it's really important, if that's something that you're thinking about, having a higher filtration, that's really only able to be installed when in a new construction situation, or if you did a massive like retrofit. So basically if you have an existing home, you'd have to replace your furnace and all your ductwork, and you might not be able to access all that depending on where it is, especially if it's running through your walls. So if you have a single story house and your ductwork's in an attic and crawl space area, it might be easy to do that. But if you have a 2-story or you have additions and that kind of thing, it might be hard. So that's one thing. Make sure you change out your furnace filter, look for what you have, and replace it. And do that about every 3 months, depending on how much you're using your system. Other thing I'm going to offer is, if you can find your nameplate on your furnace that includes the brand name and the model number, if you want to take a picture of that and send me a message, I can look up to see how old. Usually I can look up. Most of the time I can figure out how old your existing system is, so that you can kind of think about when it might need to be replaced. So if you talk to an installer company or an HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning contractor, they might tell you to replace your system sooner rather than later, which I can kind of agree with, because the newer systems are a lot more energy efficient, and so you'll end up saving money. But if you have a perfectly operational system right now, you might, and the budget's not there, you might just want to keep what you have for now until it's time. So generally, rule of thumb is you can have your system for 15 to 20 years. I've seen people replace them sooner than that or later than that, but that's kind of a rule of thumb for length of sort of a lifespan for a furnace. Lost my train of thought for a second. One other reason you might want to replace your furnace sooner rather than later. So if you have a gas furnace, so it's really important to know if you have a gas or oil or electric. So if you have a gas or oil furnace, you want to really make sure that you have, if it's an older system, you want to make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors in that and near that space, because it's possible that they might be natural drafting. And if you're not sure what that means, send me a picture, or if you're curious if yours is one of those, send me a picture of it and I can help you figure out if that's what it is. Generally, there's like on the front of it, there's an opening, there's like a horizontal slot that's open, and that's like, so it's natural drafting, so it's taking air from inside your house and using that as a draft to be able to operate the system. So those are typically around 70% efficient, and it's possible that they can be backdrafting into the house if you're running like your bath fan and your kitchen range hood and your clothes dryer. If you're exhausting a lot of air outside of the house, it's possible that the gas can actually backdraft into your house. So it's definitely a health and safety concern. So if you think you might have one of those, send me a picture and I will see if I can figure it out from the picture. And then also the nameplate label, so I can do some research. So feel free to do that. All right, I'm gonna get to the question real quick. Do you have a web page to cover what I do? So I have a website, enerstructa.com, and I have the first, if you just go there, there's the first pages covers all the different services I offer. So I do a range of home energy assessments for existing homes, and then I work with new construction as well. And so there's different levels of assessments that I can do. I can do kind of a basic home energy score, or I can get really in depth with doing blower door testing and thermal imaging with that to really help identify some of the possible areas of the home that could be improved and any health and safety concerns there. Okay, I don't think there's any more questions. So back to furnaces. There's some natural drafting gas furnaces that are 70%. Then they move to ones that have motors and so induced draft, and those are around 80% efficient. Newer construction homes so those two both could potential have combustion. They do not have any sealed combustion, so got a visitor outside. They do not have any, they do not have sealed combustion. So the new furnaces, which is really exciting, they have sealed combustion. So that way all of the gas it's in this white PVC tube. So it brings in fresh air from the outside instead of from bringing in air from your house and possibly causing that backdrafting issue. It pulls in air from the outside and then it exhausts the gas through another white PVC tube to the outside. So it's a completely sealed system from the house, and it's very safe and it's very efficient. So those furnaces are generally around 95 or 96% efficient. So if you have an older furnace that's gas and it's 70% efficient and it's maybe 15 years old, I would recommend thinking about replacing it sometime soon with a newer furnace. And that's pretty standard. Most contractors out there, that's pretty typically what they're installing. If you have an electric furnace, there are new heat pump. There's new well, it's not new technology, but there are heat pump furnaces. So they are way more efficient than standard electric furnaces. So if you have an electric system, I would ask about installing a heat pump furnace. And heat pumps can offer air conditioning as well. And so maybe with a gas furnace, you have an electric air conditioner. So again, those are going to be much more efficient than your older electric air conditioner. So what if you don't have a duct system? What if your furnace, you don't have any ducting in your house? Well, maybe you have an electric resistance system with baseboard heating and you don't have any ductwork. And so what's a good option there as far as making a replacement? Because those are not very efficient. If you have cadet heating, some of those are a fire hazard, and so you might want to consider replacing that with a ductless mini split system. So those systems, they do not require duct systems, so that makes them more cost effective. They heat as well as cool. Generally, there's an outdoor unit and there's one or more multiple indoor heads that can be mounted on the wall or possibly in the ceiling. So they're a little bit more concealed, so they're not kind of as obvious. Not everyone likes the look of having a mini split head on the wall, but there are options to install them in the ceiling so that you don't see them as much. And I see a lot of new construction homes with these systems. Just it makes cost sense, and it gives you that heating, both heating and cooling. You don't have to have that additional duct system. So every once in a while, I'll see a new ducted electric ducted system that's a heat pump system, just because people are a little bit more comfortable with ducted systems. But really, having a mini split is nice because you can really control the comfort in your home, because a little bit more room by room case, because you can have a head in your main living space, and then you can have one in your bedroom and one on different floors. Generally, the best install for those is having a 1-to-1 ratio, so one or outdoor head to one indoor head. So that's going to be the most efficient. Definitely not going to be the most cost effective, but there are, so that would be the most, what would be the recommendation. We're still, for our house, we're probably going to be doing mini splits. There's some other new technology that can use heating with the heat recovery ventilator we want to use as well. So we're exploring that option to have that integrated. So having that heat pump technology is really moving the industry forward, and that's where we're going. So we'll be talking about that in another video on probably our Monday series for our off-grid home. And yeah, so if you have electric resistance baseboard heating, or even like a wall heater, I would recommend looking into ductless mini splits. Let's see, what else is there? You might have radiant in-floor heating with a boiler system. So, when those get older, that's not technology I'm as familiar with because it's not as common. So as that technology gets older, there are newer boilers that are more efficient. And so you might, when you need to replace it, you can look into those options. Let's see. So we also, another thing, one other heating source you can talk about are wood heating, especially in rural areas. So wood, it might make sense for you to have a wood stove in your home because you have acreage and you can get wood for free, and that is something you can use in your home. So that's great. It's definitely want to have a carbon monoxide detector installed in your house because it is producing combustion. And in a new construction and in tighter homes, if you're doing retrofit work, so if you're insulating and air sealing your house, which is great because then you're controlling where the air is coming, or you're controlling that you're not having any air leaks, and then hopefully you're putting in a balanced ventilation system. But with tighter homes, it's harder for that combustion appliance to have enough makeup air, and so you might end up having to open a window. So I've been in some new construction houses and some retrofits that have wood stoves, and so that's something just to think about, is making sure that if you still want to keep using your wood stove, that you have makeup air, and that could be as simple as opening up a window, just especially to get it started. Okay, I think that's it for now. So feel free to send me a message if you want to figure out how old your system is, and we can talk about it. I can do a little investigation to see if I can figure out how old it is and what type of system it is. I'm happy to do that remotely. And if you have more questions about doing duct sealing or changing out your furnace filters, please just send me a message. And if you want, we can even schedule a Zoom meeting or something or a phone call to chat remotely until we're able to go back into homes again. So, all right, take care. Join us next Wednesday for another healthy homes and home performance topic. And I hope you stay safe and well. All right, bye.